Welcome to Risky Thoughts with Rob and Roy.
I'm Rob.
And I'm Roy. And this is episode 2. So we're not going to title the episodes anymore just because like the nature of our conversations just they kind of go all over the place, and then it kind of doesn't it's not coherent with the titles. So
Yeah, I think we're better off to retroactively name the episode.
That's it. They're just talks, and this is episode 2. Okay.
So what are we talking about today, Roy?
So today we are talking about people pleasing. Okay. I am a people pleaser. You know, let's just remember in like elementary school you had like the integer line. Let's just say that we're all people pleasers. For us to even go out into society and to interact with people, we need to be on this line. Otherwise, like you have things going detrimentally wrong with your relationships in life. And we see that. You know, sometimes you have people who just speak their mind nonstop, and it's pushing people away. Right? I'm of the fundamental nature that we want to bring people close. You never want to like let people go. And but one aspect is you also want to protect yourself and your identity and your persona and all these things, your ego, you know. So we're talking about people pleasing, right?
Yeah, so let's help articulate and define the term people pleasing and what we mean by it. So I think if my understanding is correct, what you're associating with the term people pleasing is a modification of your behavior or your beliefs so that you are aligning them with the people that are around you or individual that's around you, whatever it is. Even so much to a point where you are willing to lie so that you are accommodating for the acceptance of the person or people around you. I'm assuming this is what we're defining as people pleasing.
Yeah, I think that's a part of it. I think agreement and disagreement, those words should be in there too. You know, someone's saying something that you don't agree with, and you're just kind of like, yeah. Or someone's blaming someone, you know, and you're just like, oh, yeah. Just, you know, that guy's an asshole or whatever. Sorry for swearing. But, and you're kind of doing it in a way it's kind of hurting yourself. And you feel it. You know, you're just like, fuck, like, and it's draining, you know, because someone on the other table is saying something completely ridiculous, and we see it all on the news today, right? And you kind of, another big part of it is like, and if we go to the fundamental, if we take it back to like a higher level of analysis, you know, you do it to seem non-threatening, right? You know, so you're kind of off targets. You're the focus of the talker's gaze is not on you, right? And I fundamentally think that it's not a good position, right? And once again, we're talking about that integer line, and you want to be somewhere on it, right? Because I think, you know, unfortunately, we had a conversation earlier saying that we have to be on it, otherwise this whole shebang doesn't work.
Yeah, so I think I'm gonna, what I'd like to do first is that a couple of examples that come to my mind immediately are high school kids who, for example, wanted to be part of the popular clique. And in order for them to do that, they need to do things that are outside of what they would normally do. Maybe they participate in the bullying of another child. You know, something, maybe they do drugs. They're not normally that kind of kid, but they do it so they can fit in. Mm-hmm. I think that's an effort to people please. Mm-hmm. And that their target audience for the pleasing is obviously the cool clique. I think you see it in work. Mm-hmm. Typically, those people in the workplace that participate in the people pleasing are considered brown nosers, right? And so, just with those two analogies in mind, it's like there's like this negative cloud that's starting to build in my head around the idea of people pleasing. But to take it back to what you just said, because we did talk about this previously and prior to our microphone being turned on, you know, we did talk about. And it was actually my position where I said, I don't think that you can get away from people pleasing completely. Although it has bad impacts and there's something bad associated with it, we all kind of know this subconsciously, there is actually a requirement for it to exist, because as a species, we require cooperation and integration of different parties in order to accomplish the tasks that we need for survival, or anyways, once upon a time, and now, whatever, without going down another rabbit hole here. Basically, you need to be able to cooperate with your colleagues or with your friends or with your family or with whoever. And in order to cooperate, like I said to you earlier, I think it's about optimizing that level of cooperation.
Yeah.
And I don't believe that you can be on either end of the spectrum. I don't think that you can be completely honest and completely unfiltered, because you're going to be pushed out of the circle very quickly socially,
Yeah.
because people are just going to be like, you're a Debbie Downer, or they're just going to not, if you're not, if you're always just brutally honest,
Mm-hmm.
it can come off as being unattractive, right? So you might get pushed aside. And likewise, if you go full Stepford Wives, where you're putting on a complete show,
Yeah.
it's also not beneficial, because then you're just starting to lie to yourself, and you start building this pattern of lying, and it becomes just part of who you are, and that's bad too. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that there is a need for it, and I think the objective for me is trying to understand where is that point of balance, and perhaps what we can do is we can dissect one of the examples. Maybe we can take the workplace for example.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking you brought up an example of the people bullying, right? So, I want to kind of clarify or expand this. It's not just high school. Bullying happens everywhere. It's a
Right.
part of life, right? The people bullying, there's definitely pleasers in there, right? They're going along with something that they probably don't feel is right, but they're doing it anyways. But I also think the one being bullied too can also be the pleaser. Like you are, and I'm speaking from my own experience of being that guy in the group who would take shit. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? So I'm taking shit and I'm appearing non-threatening, but deep down it's just like perhaps I am, and I believe I am. You
Right.
know what I mean? So there's like a disconnect, and you know, honesty. Like I think that we want to, you said not to be completely honest. I think we want to strive towards being honest. Maybe we can never achieve it with the structure of our, social nature, but we want to achieve it in that perspective. So people who are brutally honest, let's even like start to categorize a little bit more. There's some people out there who instantly something bad happens and, oh, it's his fault, it's his fault, it's his fault. Sure, that is brutally honest, right? But the approach of that is like, and people are kind of in agreement with it, right? um, what does a people pleaser do in that situation? You know what I mean? It's your fault, it's your fault, because you're an easy target, you know um, and I've just been kind of going through this little transformation too. Like, I'm having like a hard time at my house. I got people who are very sick, not to get into details,
Details.
and
Yeah.
like something just kind of snapped in my mind. And with COVID, I've always been the one in high school, and anyone who's listening to this who knows me, I was always the one who was always on a hiatus. Like, I would come out for one party, and you never see me for years, and I come back. I think it's because it was draining. It's draining to go into that environment and like continually please when you have this deep down strong kind of opinion or thoughts, and for it to get sidelined. And you're the same way.
I am.
You know what I mean? So it's like, there's definitely a therapy in these conversations and finding someone who you can talk to about these things. But it's not a big deal. I'm not trying to make a big deal of it. I'm just trying to say, how can we optimize our lives when we go out into public? Well, number one, I don't get drained as much anymore because I don't go out there trying to, you know,
Please.
please and do something funny. I would come dressed with like an LED bow tie or something extra to make people laugh, like a gag. You know what I mean? That was
Mm-hmm.
the role I fell into as a people pleaser, with a little bit of intelligence. You know what I mean? So that's where someone like that goes. You know what I mean? He's just, oh, Roy, never change. You're also funny. You have an interesting perspective on life, but I've just stopped doing it. Like with the, you already know. I'm gonna bring up Goggins,
Yeah.
right?
Sooner or later, it's coming.
David Goggins is like, listen, guys, I ran 5K today, and I went to Good Life, did like an hour workout, 1,000 calories. It's still a joke, but the point is, he has this line, and it gets misinterpreted, and why I want to like kind of clarify this for people to listen to, because it's fuck people, right? And some people are like, oh, fuck people. You know what? I'm gonna be totally repulsive and just yell at them and whatever. No, no, no. Like, my take on it, because that still consumes energy. That rage when you see that person yelling and screaming and just always just in a fit. You know what I mean? About anything that happens, anything that goes wrong. It's
Mm-hmm.
just, we all know that people, and it's a natural person that exists amongst us, and it's just like no, it's not fuck people. It's just fuck what they think.
Yeah, be
You know what I mean?
yourself.
Be yourself. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? You do what you want to do, and it's just like, I don't know. I'm still at the transition of where I'm going to these social parties, and you've obviously invited me, and like I'm not saying much.
Hmm.
It's because like I'm comfortable, and the anxiety has decreased for me tremendously because there's a small nuanced things like you go into a situation and it's a party, and a lot of introverts like ourselves get very burned out because they're trying to please, right? And kind of the essence of an anxiety is like it's a willingness of not knowing what to do, right? So your target is I got to do something to please, but fundamentally you cannot please people. Like you can please them in the sense that you can appease them, you know what I mean, but you cannot. It's an infinite task. Like you can't do it, right? So it's like now your anxiety is going up like crazy. But like I don't know, I've approached the situation. This is my own experience where I'll come out and I'll just be myself. You know what I mean? If I don't want to talk or someone says something like, well, okay, well, fuck it. I don't really care. I don't have to challenge their ideas anymore. Like
So
so yeah.
you've brought a lot to the
I
table.
know. I'm so sorry, guys.
No, it's perfect.
Yeah.
Actually, that's great. Because typically I'm the one talking a lot, right? So
Yeah.
I'm glad that this actually indicates your passion for the topic for tonight,
Absolutely.
and I definitely respect that. So I am also like you and I didn't grow up that differently. There were obviously different circumstances in our lives, but I think that you and I were both, you know, farther from the cool kids, than the average person.
Absolutely.
So, and that was who we were.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think the younger you are,
But I just want to interrupt you. I'm so
sure,
sorry.
sure, no problem.
We were like I think ourselves, our inner core was far from the cool kids, but we were actually part of their crew. Like I don't know. Like I could always just jump into. If anybody who's gone to my high school, like I think you would. Like it's just kind of I'm not trying to self flatter myself. It's just an observation pointing to my theory. It's just like I would go to each of these groups. I knew everyone. I knew, and I came from Markham, very diverse group of people,
Right.
all colors. But I would join all their groups, and they would have me. One time there was like this award ceremony, and like they gave me an award, and I like everyone in the whole class, everyone in the whole school gave me a standing ovation. Like, but it was for nothing. It was some stupid like like a low achievement like participation. It's like yeah, Roy, yeah, different grades, everyone. You know what I mean? And they liked me, but they didn't know. I didn't even know who Real Roy was. And, it's a lifelong journey. But the point is like, we can enter those different groups with ease. So we're far away from them, but we understand them and we understand that dynamic. But
Well, so for me, things were a little different.
Okay,
I wasn't bullied at all, but I just didn't associate with what you would have considered to be the popular cliques. Like I wasn't part of that. I was an intellect. I was an academic, right? Like I was very smart and I did very well in school, and therefore I was put into advanced placement when I was younger, and I stuck with that group right through high school until I got to university. And there was this transitionary period in my life where I did start to hang out with someone who was part of the cool group. I'm not going to name names, but I worked with this person, and that was the segue. That was like the medium, so that I jumped from, out of the world I was existing in into a different space. But what I carried with me and what was always very consistent with me was that I was a people pleaser. I did the same thing that I think you did. We still do it today to some degree.
Oh, for sure.
It's been controlled, I would say, a little more, but I definitely am always sort of judging the opinion of the person across the table from me, right? I cannot help it. I can't help it. So when I sit down with somebody for the first time and I meet them, I have this like weird tendency to try, I'll throw different flavors into the pot and I'll just see which one comes out smelling the best, right? And maybe it's a bad analogy, but anyway, my point is I sort of try different approaches. Like I become like this chameleon in the moment where maybe I'll start off by being, actually my starting position is generally based off of my judgment of the person across the table from me.
Yeah.
So if I, for example, given that I do construction management, when I go onto a construction site, the stereotypical behavior of a construction worker is that they're cold and they're hard and like they're just rough around the edges. So I go in with that
Yeah.
attitude and I present myself accordingly.
You're very open. I think that's like a one characteristic, right? Like openness.
Sure,
You know what I
maybe
mean?
maybe that's what it is.
And like I said, I just want to say it and throw it out there because it's a good thing to be open. Like
Yeah.
there's but yeah, continue.
Well, all I'm saying is at the end of the day, like I my whole getting to know somebody is rooted in this idea of understanding them and their desires and sort of catering to that. And it used to be, something that completely controlled me, and it was extremely exhausting. It was definitely exhausting. And the problem with it is, like you said, is if you lead if you lead into if you lead down a path of trying to please somebody else, you're completely disregarding your own needs.
Yeah.
And the consequence of that is that it actually makes you weak. Because you now, you are like the prey with like the sharks swimming around you.
Yeah.
And instead of like becoming one of the sharks or finding a way to defend yourself from the sharks, you're like offering little bits of yourself to eat, just to keep them at bay for the time being.
That's a good analogy.
And then slowly but surely you're actually like giving away everything of what you are.
Yeah.
And it's not sustainable. Eventually you're just going to run out of who you are.
Right.
And it's going to lead you into a place of like depression or some form of
Yeah.
deep anxiety.
Right.
And so I transitioned obviously out of that, and I became a very extroverted person.
Yeah.
I'm like, if anybody out there listening to this knows me, then you know that I'm a very talkative individual.
Yeah.
I love everybody I meet. I love building relationships. And what I try to do now is like, I try to have this balance that I keep in the back of my head at all times. It's a subconscious thing, but I try to keep it in the back of my head where it's like, yes, I want to make sure that you're not upset, but at the same time, I also don't want to be upset, and I don't want to feel uncomfortable either. So let me see if I can find a middle ground. And I think this brings us now back to the point that we had mentioned earlier. And we're going to refer to Jordan Peterson, just like you referred to David Goggins. I talk a lot about Jordan Peterson, and I think he says one thing that I find to be very, very applicable to this moment. You have to play a game in such a manner so that people who are playing with you will want to play with you again. And that doesn't matter. It's not. It doesn't imply necessarily, like, for example, you hear that you might think like, oh, you're playing a game of soccer with somebody, and you don't want to be the person running around shattering shins because no one's going to want to play with you again. Like, that'll be the last time that you play with them. You don't want to be a poor sport because people are not going to want to play with you. You want to play the game so that even whether you win or lose in that actual game, people still want to play again. And that applies also to the idea of the social world and the social dynamic. You don't want to play that game where people just don't want to play with you anymore. And that happens when you become either the bully, like that is too far on the right side of the spectrum where, they may have their moment, they may have the gratification in high school around people, I mean, let's face it, teenagers are not fully developed. They don't have a full understanding of the world. If you try being a bully like that in real life, you're going to get shot down 99% of the time. Like in a workplace, or if you try to do it in a social setting even. It's not respected like it was in high school. In high school, the bully was like, oh, the cool kid. Now, a bully as you're older, it's like this. It's disgraceful. Like, how could you still be so childish? So anyway, my point is, I think that's the reality of this whole conversation here, is that we need to find how can you play the game optimally such that people want to continue to play that game with you.
You're right, and even in my language too, it's like I agree. There's a balance that's required. Like, if you go out to a party and you're not saying anything, mind you, like small talk's always been hard for me. Like, what I mean, and I just don't. It's just a cover. It's a cover, right? Like when you see the world in a certain way, these kind of personas walking around, it's just like small talk's fun and it can be enjoyable 100% if you're passionate about something. But and this is where I'm gonna unfortunately take this into like a super tangent. It's just like, like I think human problems and conflict with yourself and others, like those are the more interesting things to talk about. You know what I mean? It has to do with this, surrounded with growth and stuff. But like.
But there's nothing wrong with that being your preferred topic
Yeah.
of choice.
So it makes people uncomfortable though. Like,
Sure,
it
maybe
can
it
make,
does.
for some people not. Some people, it does make them. There's a fear to know yourself. You know, like it's a fear to question your, your way of doing things, and you get the ego involved, and they're just, and that's why we see people get aggressive, in disagreement, even like with our conversations, like there's just enough disagreement so that we're not like, oh, shut the fuck up, what I mean?
Yeah.
There's just enough. It's such a delicate amount of agreement and disagreement, right? And this is what our podcast is about. It's by kind of like showing you our relationship as friends and our discussions, like, and maybe maybe you guys can pick it apart and understand it and have these conversations with people, like, you know what I mean? Like, at the end of the day, it's just this is a bit of a tangent, but like,
Well, that's okay, and I actually want to pull it right back because
Yeah.
you said something in that tangent that actually provoked a thought in my head that ties back to the analogy of like the high school kids and the bully and all that.
Yeah.
You're right. People are afraid to face the truths about themselves and about human behavior because there is definitely a lot that is there that you would prefer not to think about.
Yeah.
And this okay, right now we could very well go on a different tangent, and I'll refrain from doing that.
Try to tie it in with
I'm
our
gonna
title,
keep
Risky Thoughts.
so yeah, I'm gonna keep it where we were here on the topic of people pleasing. So I do think that when you made that comment, what went through my head is you're right. And if you watch any like teen drama movie, the antagonist in the movie always ends up facing this moment of realization of like how shitty of a person they are and how poorly they've been treating the people around them. Like think about like a high school movie that has in that setting, and there's always like the prissy girl who's like the one that's sort of like the bossy one who's like the cool girl, and at the end of the movie she always ends up sort of being punished for her behaviors, but she also faces a moment of realization where she's like, even my friends have turned on me, maybe I am a bad person. And I think that truly is like, I really like the idea of talking about bullying and keeping this sort of tight to the bullying topic because it is something very applicable in today's society, and it's certainly something that I don't want my son to go through and stuff.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like I don't want that to happen to him. But so anyway, what I'm getting at though is if you want to put a bully in his place and you're an authority figure in the school, so you're the guidance counselor or you're the teacher, one of the most cheeky ways of getting the kid to like get put in his place is make him aware of his own demons, because then he's really gonna like, he'll be like, you're gonna break him, right? The reason why I personally think that people become bullies is they have their own internal demons and they don't want to face them, so they shed that fear and that anger and that anguish and everything else that's going along in their head about their own life. Absolutely. And they pass it on to the person next to them, right? They take it out on the weak one.
It's a projection.
Yeah.
Well,
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a projection. Yeah. And if you get the bully to just face their own demons, it may suck for that individual in the moment, and maybe for the upcoming near future where they have to deal with the consequences of facing these demons, but they will come out better and they will come out stronger, in the long run. And I think that is truthfully where we should sort of lead children. Like, and I say this because, again, all of this ties back to my thoughts of my son. And when he gets older, I want to walk him down a path where he doesn't get caught in a position where he has all these demons and then turns into the bully. Yeah. And I also don't want him to get, because you can go two different ways if you have these demons. One, you can project. The other is you project inwards, and then you become the people pleaser, right? And I don't want him to go either way. I want him to be able to face his demons, express himself accordingly, and therefore doesn't have anything that's contained within him that makes him lean left or right. I want him to sort of stay down the middle.
That's, it just blew my mind. Like, project inwards. You know what I mean? Like, project onto yourself.
Yeah,
like,
well, that's what
crazy.
happens.
And listen, that's interesting. I would definitely want to unpack that maybe off air, like, to project inwards, and you could perhaps fall into becoming a people pleaser. Interesting.
I'm gonna make one very quick comment on that because anybody who's ever read the 12 Steps to Recovery for any addiction program, you'll recognize that in that program, um, there is something that talks about the reason to why you may have done what you did, or that you may have become victim to an addiction,
Mm-hmm.
is because of a need for self-punishment.
Yeah.
And that kind of ties to the idea of
Yeah.
the projecting inwards, right? Like,
Yeah.
the bully punishes the weak. The one who projects inward punishes themselves.
Yeah.
And anyways, just a sidebar note, but let's keep
Yes.
it back online here.
Yeah, and just to kind of wrap this whole session up, you said like about bullying. We were talking about bullying and stuff like that. Like, I want to make it clear. Like, even I'm going through some really, really tough stuff with
Mm-hmm.
just insane, and you know the story,
I
but
do.
When these bad things happen, and a bullying mindset, a persona is going to be throwing out blame and hurling things at you and everyone around you, like, these are the moments where I have, in the right mindset and the right framework on how to attack life, experienced the most growth.
Right.
And this is something that I kind of fundamentally disagree with the current paradigm of our society right now. It's just that bullying is bad. Yes, of course. Once again, let's go back to that integer, like malicious, like evil, like just bipolar bullying is 100% bad. But there is a certain level of bullying that's inherent in our biology. And of course, some people may say, oh, but we're civilized and we have rules. And it's like, no, but I'm telling you that if I wasn't bullied, I wouldn't have these realizations right now.
100%. And
Yeah.
this is a segment called Risky Thoughts for a reason, because
Right.
you and I generally, I'm not going to say as a whole, disagree with the left on everything, but, we certainly have our positions
Yeah.
that we are not afraid to express. And I agree with you. And I don't want to make it sound like I'm contradicting what I just finished saying about bullying. Bullying, yes, that type of bullying that drives kids to like levels of suicide and that kind of shit, very bad.
Absolutely.
Very
Yeah.
bad. But if you can't deal with a little bit of,
Yeah.
a few stones being thrown at
Yeah,
you,
yeah.
then you're too fragile.
It's too fragile, and perhaps, and I don't want to say it, maybe you have been given the appropriate tools on how to approach the situation. So it's like, once again, perhaps another projection. It's just like a projection onto our society. It's like, bullying's bad, and let's pink shirts, and listen, I get it, but why are we blaming again?
We're
We're
doing the same thing
blaming
the bully.
ourselves, our nature. Let's teach people the approach on how to handle the situation.
Yeah.
You know,
It's far more effective.
far more effective, and it's far more positive.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? To rather than say, oh, this guy bullied this and this, and nothing happens. But I'm saying that in my situation where, I dealt with it and I read about it, and there's so much good information online nowadays that teaches you how to approach these situations, with me approaching it like that, that is the light that shines onto other people, and they're like, oh, yes, I need to be more articulate. That's what it comes down to. I need to be more articulate, and when I'm criticizing, I'm not going to criticize this individual because he's articulate. And that's the sword I use, because I'll pick it apart, and then they're like, well, I can't attack him like with blame anymore. Let's try the other way of articulation, and that's the key. That's the way out for both people. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
anyways, it's like a very positive kind of feel good, like, sentiment at the end. But
No, but I like that, and I think that it is productive, because at the end of the day, the whole reason why we do these podcasts is for someone listening to basically feel the realization that we feel when we have our conversations and we come to a
Absolutely.
conclusion.
That's it.
And I think that you nailed it right on the head, is that it is 100%. It's not about trying to shut down bullying in the way that our current society is trying to shut it down. It's about trying to get people going through those experiences to be able to better articulate, what they're feeling, what the situation is, what's actually happening, articulating potential solutions, and being strong on those thoughts. And I think that if you are able to strongly and clearly articulate something, it provides you the backbone that you may not have otherwise. Because if you say something with such clear logic, it's very difficult for anybody to disagree with it.
Absolutely,
Right?
man. people go back, and even you guys have been in this situation where someone got, let's just say, like, even in a car, someone's like, oh, this asshole, like, he pulled me over, and you know, like, and then the guy pulls down his window, and he starts saying some stuff to him, some points, and it's like, oh, you can't drive, whatever. And then you'll see that person always be like, no, I can drive, and they're talking about it. But imagine, like, once again, like, that was an insult. That was a negative insult that guy hurled. But if he articulated something, and I'm saying this can apply to every situation in a fight or whatever it is, if he articulates something very clear to the individual committing the erroneous behavior,
Yeah.
you know, that person would take that piece of articulation back and dwell on it. Guaranteed.
Yeah, and whether it happens in that moment or not, maybe he still throws the punch and punches the kid in the face.
100%.
But he'll think about it for the next time.
Yeah.
And I think you used a perfect example, and we're going to try to wrap this up in the next 5-ish minutes.
Yeah.
But a road rage incident is a perfect example of this.
Yeah.
You get two people who are completely out of their minds angry, and they're about to fight.
Yeah.
The only times that those fights get disarmed quickly is when somebody is able to say, listen, like, you can, let's say you're the person who's really angry and I'm the driver.
Yeah.
Now, of course, my natural instinct is to want to get angry back.
Yeah.
But if I'm able to sit there and hear you yell at me, but listen to what you're saying and be like, you know, you're coming up to me, you asshole, you cut me off, blah, blah, blah. If I just take the time to say, okay, let me hear what he just said. I cut him off. If you stop in that moment and just say, look, man, maybe I did cut you off. I'm sorry. I didn't even think about it.
Yeah.
But you know what? Maybe you're right about that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to cut you off. And I understand that you're angry, but there's no need for this. I made a mistake. I apologize. We all make mistakes. Like, that's a much more feasible approach to disarming the situation.
100%.
If I'm just like, you know, no, fuck you, man, you're wrong. I didn't. Then now you're just adding fuel into a fire. It's just going to get out of control.
That's it.
And if I cower and I just go back into my shell, it's not good either, because he's just going to keep pressing.
Yeah.
But if I stand up and articulate my thought to the person, it sort of disarms them, because now it's like you're not angry, you're not scared. So what really can I do now as an attacker?
100%. And like, you were honest with yourself in that situation, you know what I mean? Like, I made a mistake, man, for even reacting, like, you know, and like, but I'm ultimately not, you know, the biggest line is, I'm not responsible for your anger and your reaction, man.
Yeah.
And like, when you say something like that to someone, and I've done it to people, you know, it stops them in the future as well, because, like, you know, we don't want to be emotional, like, in these situations. Like, we want to approach it with a calm, collective mindset. That's a trope. You know what I mean? Like, that's something that I've always been aiming towards, like, that calm and collective. But yeah, anyways.
So I'm just going to go out there and say it as we conclude this. Yeah. But your voice is the perfect representation of calm and collective. And anybody that's listening to this can 100% attest to that. His voice is like soothing as hell. Okay, so I think that's more or less it for the day.
Yeah.
So I guess everybody, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, join us on another episode of Risky Thoughts next weekend. Yeah.
Take care.
Take care.